It's March of 2019, and for Janel Grant, it's already been a tough year. After devoting around-the-clock caregiving to both of her parents, they both tragically pass away. Struggling financially and without a job, Janel dedicates herself to finding gainful employment while volunteering her time in her community. A close friend reaches out to Vince McMahon, the billionaire owner of World Wrestling Entertainment. To Janel's surprise, Mr. McMahon agreed to meet with Janel at his penthouse apartment in Connecticut. The meeting went well, and Janel was excited to work with the premier sports entertainment company, unaware that her start with WWE and Vince McMahon would also be the start of a nearly 3-year nightmare filled with humiliation, forced sex, and fear. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and welcome to Exposed, the scandalous files of the elite, Vince McMahon's ownership of Janel Grant. So before we start, I want to give everybody a warning. Look, this is a graphic one. If foul language offends you, sexual situations offend you, turn this podcast off. It's not for you. This is a really graphic episode. It's also important to mention this is a lawsuit that has been filed by Janel Grant, and it has not been adjudicated. Mr. McMahon has not been found guilty of anything. I'm going to give you the facts as they are laid out in the actual lawsuit that was filed January 25th of 2024, just a few days prior to this recording. I will tell you that all of the facts I'm about to give you as they are laid out by Janel Grant are disturbing. So when we left you last, we had just told you about the disturbing text message, to say the least, that Vince McMahon had sent Miss Grant, and it was immediately following the first threesome that she engaged in, where he actually defecated on her head. After that occurred, McMahon started pressuring Miss Grant into several additional threesomes. Now, in large part, she felt she had no choice, especially after McMahon's comments that I had told you in part 1, where he tried to take credit in her keeping her job when they were doing layoffs. Remember when I told you that in episode 1? He had complete control over her employment. This is the way she felt. And not only did he employ her, he also paid her for all of her medical care. That's a big deal. That's a lot of money. And he controlled that. But don't forget this, y'all. He also had naked pictures of her, naked videos of her. And in the back of her mind, she's thinking, I don't want to make him mad because he could release all this. So after the threesomes began, McMahon became more sadistic and his fantasies focused on more control. Things like choking, sensory deprivation. So what is that, y'all? That's blindfolding you, for example. Turning off all the lights, putting you in the dark. Pain, humiliation, in group scenarios in which Miss Grant was to be physically overwhelmed and subservient to a group of men. So I'm going to read you another text, and it's, if you thought the first text I read you in part 1 was bad, buckle up. This is a text from Mr. McMahon to Miss Grant. Regarding your last picture, you need your panties ripped off and 3 big black dicks in all 3 holes at the same time. Way up your pussy and way up your ass, as far as they will go, but even farther. And the thickest cock goes down your throat, so it makes you gag and convulse as those big black cocks pound away. It feels like from the start you're being assaulted, but it just made you come nonstop. Just one continuous constant orgasm, and just before you pass out, those big black dicks squirt their loads of cum inside you. As you lay on your stomach, the cum is coming out of all your holes. I'll turn you over and jack off all over you. I'm going to let you think about that for a second. That's an actual text. According to Miss Grant, and I'm actually looking at a copy of that text. Crazy. So on one occasion, he instructs Miss Grant, do not knock on the door, because if I see you, I will rape you in the hallway. To leave no doubt regarding the dynamic of the relationship, y'all, on May 12th of 2020, McMahon texted Miss Grant, I'm the only one who owns you and controls who I want to fuck you. A theme that was often reiterated throughout their involvement. On June 17th of 2020, Miss Grant sent text to McMahon noting her 1-year anniversary in joining the WWE. She's proud of this. She made him a year, right, with World Wrestling Entertainment. McMahon completely ignored the text, never responded. She is now his sex pet, and that's all he looks at her as. If she wants to talk about anything other than what he wants to talk about, which I've already read you several of those texts, he's not having it. He won't even respond. Wow. So a month later, McMahon reminded Miss Grant about the far-reaching results of his texting out explicit content of her. By now, thousands of men see you every day all over the world. They all want to fuck you. Around this time, McMahon openly shared explicit photographs and salacious stories about Miss Grant with WWE crew at tapings, a group McMahon also referred to as her quote-unquote fan club. McMahon exuberantly messaged her a truthful story of having just shared explicit content of her with a group of 12 men on the WWE tech crew, and recounted the obscene details he shared with them in that text. And I'm going to read you that. I just passed my phone around to a bunch of guys on the tech crew. They were screaming, OMG, she's fucking beautiful. Look at that ass. I'd like to get into that. I paused to count out loud how many guys there were. 12. Then I said, okay, there's 12 of you, and she would love to fuck each and every one of you at one time. The guys then cheered. But she will only do it if she takes 3 at a time. That brought up a huge reaction, LOL. She wants one deep in her ass, one way down her throat, and one in her pussy. And you can pound her and keep on pounding her till you pop your load. So she may scream and try to say no, although it would be difficult to say anything with that cock down her throat. They laughed. I then said, listen, no matter what, just pound away till you squirt. Baby, these guys were having a blast with me. Some of them didn't believe me. So I said, you were the greatest fuck in the world, and no matter how much you get, you always wanted more. And then I said, she loves cum. These techs, as we call them, we're having the time of our lives listening to my truthful story. I then said you would take a 10-minute break between each fucking, But then you would get back on your hands and knees with your ass in the air and say, okay, I'm ready. Who's next? I drove them wild, baby. Or I should say, you drove them wild. Just imagine if this was really happening, baby, how much cum you would have coming out of those holes. This is unreal. So on the occasions when Miss Grant informed McMahon that she was physically injured during their sexual encounter, responses varied from apologies to non-accountable pushback and blaming impulse control. When encounters were especially brutal, Miss Grant learned to bookend the truth of her injuries with compliments to create the least amount of pushback from McMahon. So let's talk about that for a second. You know, he is really pressuring her. Even when she's hurt, he would just get pissed, right? Oh, you just, you know, you don't want to play or whatever. And so she would literally have to compliment him into him not getting pissed. So she might say, you're just too big for me today or something to keep him from just blowing his top, because that's all she was to him. He could really care less if she had bleeding or swelling or bruising or any of this stuff from fisting her or using adult toys on her. It didn't matter. Either she was down at DTF or she wasn't. And that's how he looked at her. And I'm going to give you an instance of that. On August 28th of 2020, Miss Grant texted McMahon that she was injured during her last sexual encounter. As a result of McMahon's insistence on penetrating Miss Grant with extra large sex toys, including a vibrating wand, that McMahon ignored Miss Grant's warning that the device was not meant for insertion. So it's a vibrating toy. It's meant to be on the outside of the vagina, but he was taking the toy and shoving it inside her vagina so deep that it at one point became stuck inside her vagina. She texted that she was in pain and bleeding a lot from that incident. She texted him this and she says, I'm on the floor right now because I can't get comfortable. And then on August 29th, the next day, she texted him an update that she was still really uncomfortable and got hurt in some way that she's having trouble describing. So McMahon did apologize, saying, I'm sorry. Sometimes I get carried away. During this time, Miss Grant became so sick, and when I say sick, I mean physically ill, from the stress of the situations that McMahon has subjected her to, that her weight starts to plummet. She just can't hold anything down. She's so stressed out every time she eats, she's puking it up. Her weight plummeted so low, in fact, that she was about 100 pounds. 100 pounds. Full-grown woman. McMahon totally ignored this when she would bring it up to him. One distressing event occurred on November 21st of 2020 when McMahon drove Miss Grant to WWE headquarters to fulfill his fantasy of having a sexual encounter with her in his office, causing Miss Grant to suffer a major panic attack in the back seat while pleading with McMahon to change his mind and drive her back home. She didn't want to do that. She was very concerned about other people walking in the office. You know, there's a lot. She just started panicking and had a panic attack. He scoffs at her and then gave her an ultimatum. He says, either have a sexual encounter in the office or inside a parked car. So terrified, Miss Grant obeyed his direction and they entered the WWE headquarters for the encounter. Despite Miss Grant's repeated statements that she did not consent to threesomes with McMahon and that physical therapist, McMahon advertised her to others and told her that he had found another person to join them. And this person is also a defendant in this case. His name is John Laranitis. In November of 2020, McMahon pressed Miss Grant to make explicit photos and videos and send to Laranitis. McMahon orchestrated exchanges by instructing Miss Grant to create explicit content for Laranitis, including what to say, and even provided her with notes to adjust her performance, directing her in a porn, essentially, for another man. McMahon then facilitated the exchange of explicit content back and forth between Grant and Laranitis. Notably, even once, phone numbers were exchanged between the two, and McMahon insisted that he be privy to any of the messages Miss Grant sent to Laranitis and demanded that she report back all interactions, further illustrating the level of control he held over Miss Grant. So he sets up that threesome, or he's trying to set up threesomes with Laranitis. And what's he doing, y'all? He's grooming her. So you're going to start off with Laranitis slow. You're just going to send him nude pictures, and then you're going to send him some nude videos. And then I'm going to direct you, and I'm going to tell you what to do in those videos, because you're not turning him on enough. Only I know how you need to turn on a man. And he is basically slowly trying to get her to a point to where you know what's going to happen. Eventually he's going to say, okay, the fantasy is the fantasy, and the fantasy gets old. Now he wants it for real. Now he wants you to actually go fuck Laranitis. So on or about December 29th, 2020, a threesome was arranged between McMahon, Laranitis, and Miss Grant at McMahon's condo. McMahon instructed her to tell Laranitis that she was a neighbor and girlfriend working in the legal field, but he didn't want her to say anything about her working for the WWE. So Laranitis had no idea that she was working for the WWE. So shortly after meeting Laranitis, Miss Grant asked him if she was the first woman whom McMahon had introduced him to in such a setting. Laranitis didn't respond and shot a look directly at McMahon. So he quickly intervenes by kissing Miss Grant and initiating the sexual encounter among the three of them. He started it off. Once again, Miss Grant asked for protection. Once again, her request was denied after an assurance that Laranitis was clean. In the days that followed, McMahon texted her that Laranitis hugged me like a bear and said thank you to me about 12 times already. In contrast, Laranitis messaged Miss Grant, thanks for the fun afternoon. So not only is she looking, is he turning her into his own little sex slave, she's turning him into other people's little sex slave. And they are looking at her exactly the same way, right? Now, on or around January 25th of 2021, Miss Grant was reassigned to directly support WWE's new hire, a high-ranking employee in the legal department. And on February 5th of 2021, just 10 days later, Mr. McMahon sent Miss Grant to establish a schedule for when other men, including physical therapists and Laranitis, could have sex with Grant, which Miss Grant attempted to rebuff. And I'm going to read you the text of that attempt. Mr. McMahon starts, exactly, baby. He's not the only one. Blank, and it's redacted out, called me this afternoon begging to eat you and fuck you with his nice and hard dick. And she responds, give me another week, baby, and I'll be ready. I'm feeling more like myself. It's not great, but it's getting better. Tell him soon. So she's trying to put him off, right? Buying time. McMahon doesn't like that. Obviously, he controls her, right? How dare you tell me it's on my schedule, not on yours? So he responds back, I already told him, baby. By the way, Johnny wants Tuesdays, but not this coming one, and the occasional Saturday, but maybe I can shift it to Thursday nights. Johnny would like all the above. Text like this, y'all. Actual shift schedule. He is actually scheduling sex for this woman, right? This caused Miss Grant to suffer breakdowns on how her original hope for a new life. Remember how this whole story started. This was a woman whose parents passed away. She had no family. She's desperately seeking a job, and she finally gets one with this huge company, and the owner of the company is doing all this stuff, and those hopes are just shattered to a dehumanizing experience with no way out that she can see. In March of 2021, McMahon informed Miss Grant, who at that time was still an entry-level coordinator, that top executives in the company knew about their relationship and that her presence in the legal department was effectively delaying the company's efforts to hire a new replacement for that high-ranking official, reinforcing the fact that many within the company were all aware of the circumstances that we've been detailing. So as a result, McMahon stated that the plan was for her to change departments, and he verbally directed Miss Grant to transfer to the talent relations department and report directly to Laranitis. So everything that McMahon told her, in all likelihood, again, this is me speculating, but I'm telling you, this is how these minds work. It was all a lie. He wanted to give her an excuse to work for Laranitis because it's a part of his sexual fantasy, and Laranitis can have her whenever he wants, right? So on March 10th of 2021, Miss Grant sent McMahon a text message recapping their conversation and expressing shock and a range of concerns, including about working for Laranitis. Essentially, Miss Grant expressed a desire to be treated humanely, taken seriously. She didn't feel like they were taking her seriously, which she acknowledged could be an uphill battle. Unfortunately, Mrs. Grant's transfer to that talent relations department came with the expectation from both McMahon and Laranitis that she engage with Laranitis sexually, both physically and with explicit content. So not only do we have to have sex, you have to keep me supplied with porn videos, right? So on March 10th of 2021, WWE corporate officer number 2 informed Grant that day that she would officially be moved to that talent relations department and would quickly begin reporting to Laranitis. Although details about her role, the title, how much are you paying me, they were still being firmed up. They don't tell her any of that. In essence, Miss Grant was again finding herself in a completely undefined role, except for the understanding that she would remain a sex slave to be used and trafficked by McMahon within the WWE. So just like her first job, she's in a situation where she doesn't even know what she's supposed to be doing for this company. And as far as she can see, all I'm here to do is basically have sex with high-ranking executives. On March 12th, 2021, McMahon reminded her of the connection between her job and her role as a sex object. Let's work hard and play hard too, he told her. Then on March 16th, Miss Grant was directed to pick up a key from Laranitis' hotel room and serve herself to him as breakfast before the start of work. McMahon constantly reinforced the expectation that Miss Grant sexually performed for him and her new boss, Laranitis, both in and out of the office. McMahon wrote on March 22nd, 2021, "Do you promise to make me proud, baby? Will you show him what a porno star you can be? Will you show off for me like never before? And on days when he's in town, I want him to fuck you every morning and later in the office too." McMahon also indicated that Miss Grant should obey if Laranitis wanted to bring in yet more men. And guess what? He texted that. I'm going to read you the text, the original text. Maybe he wants 2 other guys to join you with him. Holy shit. You've told him you would do anything with him. So if he surprised you with 2 others, you would have no alternative but to take them on. OMG, the stories you could tell me then. It makes me want to come right now. By the way, I just thought of what I think is an excellent idea. Maybe you can hint that if he knows someone who can be discreet, it might be better if you and Johnny try him out first so he can get more comfortable before he's actually introduced to me. Actually, that makes total sense, doesn't it? In April of 2021, WWE's Senior Vice President of Human Resources was fired. The same month, McMahon informed Miss Grant that she would be given the title of Vice President of Operations within the Talent Relations Department. However, days later, McMahon backtracks and said she would be Director of Operations instead to avoid suspicion of a sudden promotion of Vice President. During this conversation, McMahon told Miss Grant that he had expressed to others in WWE management that he wanted her to reach a level of Vice President and spend a year or 2 in that position, as she would be able to take the experience anywhere, even if she left the company. Miss Grant left this conversation with McMahon hoping she could escape this situation. So let's talk about this. This is the first time McMahon's alluding to her leaving the company. So in McMahon's mind, or in her mind, McMahon, he's going to release me. You know, she's kind of relieved about this. That was a big deal. She just knew she needed to survive until that point. So in an April 2021 meeting between Miss Grant and WWE corporate officer number 2, that officer acknowledged that the jump initially proposed to vice president was too big and could put a target on Miss Grant's back. Nevertheless, the corporate officer number 2 presented Miss Grant with the paperwork detailing a base salary increase to $200,000 as director of operations. Now, as soon as Miss Grant began working directly for Laranitis, forcible touching and overly sexual behavior, that became pretty much a part of her daily life when she was in the office. On numerous occasions, Miss Grant was directed to visit Laranitis in his hotel room before work to what they would call serve him breakfast. These devastating experiences made Miss Grant feel as though she was being pimped out as an object for sexual gratification for her new boss. And upon information and belief, corporate funds from the WWE were used to finance his hotel stays in which these sexual encounters occurred. So not only are they doing, having sex in this company with this woman, but they're writing it off as a work expense, essentially. Per McMahon's instructions, Miss Grant reported interactions with Laranitis back to McMahon, for whom the stories were served as a source of arousal. So he's wanting her to tell him, right? This is McMahon's fantasy. Tell me all the dirty things he did to you. And the arrangement with Laranitis left Miss Grant miserable and enraged. However, in her years of experience with McMahon, she knew her request to stop would be ignored. She knew better than to do that, and at best, it would destroy her career and her reputation. She was further left feeling isolated by colleagues and surveilled by top-level employees of the WWE, and let me talk about that. There's no doubt people had suspicions. This woman now, she's rising up in the ranks, and if you're someone that's been at WWE 12 years, this woman, even though you may not know she's having sex with Laranitis in this case, if you're in that department, I'm sure it was obvious. You don't have to necessarily say it. So these people start isolating her. They're like, she's the company whore in their mind. Professionally and personally, Miss Grant's fate was entirely in the hands of McMahon, Laranitis, and other WWE executives who may have turned their, they weren't having sex with her, but they certainly turned their back and acted like they didn't see anything. And on May 24th of 2021, McMahon messaged Miss Grant to remind her that a mistake could destroy her career and that she should pursue verbal communication rather than written wherever possible. So he's starting to get a little nervous about kind of the proof, right? These text messages and things like that. So on June 14th of 2021, Miss Grant again told McMahon that she did not want to engage in sexual relations with Laranitis, adding, "I've left the hotel feeling bad about myself every single time." McMahon responded that the one-on-one encounters could cease, but that he expected threesomes with Laranitis to continue. So the following morning on June 15th of 2021, Miss Grant messaged McMahon that due to her work on an important project, she did not want a threesome that week. As a threesome won't set me up for success. It'll knock me out. To avoid pushback from McMahon, Miss Grant offered the following week instead. Wow. That blew my mind when I read it, y'all. This woman is so intimidated that, number one, she has to message him to say, "I don't want a threesome this week." But in order, she's so scared to piss off Mr. McMahon that she follows it up with, "How about we do it the following week?" So McMahon and Laranitis ignore that plea, of course, and bring her into Laranitis' office, forcibly touching and undressing her before forcing her to engage in a threesome on a conference room table. Miss Grant pleaded. She said no several times. "Please stop," several times. McMahon responded with, "No means yes." Miss Grant again told him to stop. Instead, McMahon licks his fingers and penetrated Miss Grant, saying, "Take it, bitch," with each taking turns restraining her for the other. Laranitis then joined by forcibly shoving his tongue, then penis, into Miss Grant's mouth. On June 23rd, 2021, McMahon directed Miss Grant in the middle of a workday to meet him on a lower floor. When Miss Grant arrived, McMahon led her outside to his private locker room, locked the door, and forced himself over her on a massage table. Later that day, $15,000 in gift cards to Bloomingdale's were purchased at McMahon's direction and delivered by McMahon's personal assistant to Miss Grant in her office. Now, that's McMahon's way. Let me tell you, he gets off on that. "I'm buying you." He's looking at her as a piece of property, as a slave, indeed a sex slave. On multiple other occasions, while Miss Grant worked under Laranitis, including after McMahon's promise that one-on-one encounters would end, and even after his wife moved across the country to join Laranitis, he would call Miss Grant to his office, lock the door, and zip his pants and instruct Miss Grant to perform oral sex. Through all of this, Miss Grant noticed that the less she sexually engaged with Laranitis, the less work she had. As Laranitis began to belittle Miss Grant in front of colleagues, we're going to refer to this as WWE Superstar, because that's how he's referred to in the lawsuit. Now, WWE Superstar is famous worldwide, y'all. He's a top talent in the WWE, if not the top talent, with a large, massive collective fan base, and this particular individual helps generate viewership and drives in-person attendance. Upon information and belief, McMahon began to recruit WWE Superstar for a sexual encounter with Miss Grant while she was still a coordinator in the legal department. By July of 2021, McMahon informed Miss Grant that WWE Superstar would be their next playmate. As in other instances, McMahon described his fantasy of seeing Miss Grant engaged in unmerciful sexual acts with WWE Superstar, which he would rip her open, McMahon also confided in Miss Grant that he wanted to have WWE Superstar under a new contract, while WWE Superstar indicated an interest to return to other professional endeavors. On or about July 12th of 2021, McMahon directs Grant to create personalized sexual content for this WWE Superstar. McMahon shared the photos with this WWE Superstar and then informed Miss Grant that he likes what he sees. On July 21st of 2021, McMahon flew WWE Superstar on a jet into a local airport and travel into Connecticut for what McMahon describes to Miss Grant as a business dinner, quote unquote, as well as a sexual encounter with Miss Grant in McMahon's condo. Upon information and belief, the dinner was to discuss WWE Superstar's continued involvement in the WWE. Prior to the business dinner with McMahon, WWE Superstar made a brief visit to Miss Grant's building. However, WWE Superstar did not return to the building for a sexual encounter because he was too drunk and taken back to the plane. Later that evening, after McMahon recounted the story about his dinner with WWE Superstar to Miss Grant, he sought to salvage the night with a request that they role play a sexual encounter in which McMahon acted as if he were WWE Superstar. McMahon was so physically rough with Miss Grant during this encounter that Miss Grant begged McMahon to stop numerous times, including loud cries of "Help! I'm serious. I'm scared." As he, among other things, penetrated her, fisted her, pulled her hair, pinned her, shoved her, and even open palm smacked her in the face. McMahon's assault caused Miss Grant to break down, weeping and curl into the fetal position with her arms pulled up to protect her face. McMahon alternated between slaps and shoves before admitting that, "I'm really fucking up with you right and left tonight, huh?" McMahon forbade Miss Grant from leaving his condo that night unless she could verbally assure him that there wasn't a problem and everything was okay. So she's getting up, she's trying to leave. This is the absolute deepest form of control. You're trying to leave, and this man says, "You're not going anywhere till you promise me you're okay." Because you know what he's worried about, y'all? He's worried about her calling the cops. She says, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm going home." Right. And she leaves. But it's important to note, he doesn't even send her as much of a text to see if she made it home. He could care less. He just wanted to make sure she wasn't going to call the cops. On August 21st of 2021, WWE held its biggest annual event, SummerSlam. Around that time, McMahon and WWE Superstar privately reached an informal agreement about his return. That night, McMahon texted Miss Grant a reminder that she was an enslaved object to him. And he texted her, "I want to drive you lower and lower, so low that you might beg me to sell you." I mean, this is insane. McMahon continued to advertise a sexual encounter with Miss Grant to WWE Superstar during the formal negotiation of a new contract with the WWE. This guy's negotiating a contract, and he's offering the guy sex with this girl. And he sends her a text, and he says, "Here's what blank said after I told him that part of the deal was fucking you." Laugh out loud. That's your turf. She will be ruined after me and leave your ass. Plus, after me, your tool won't fit anymore. In December of 2021, McMahon gave Miss Grant's personal cell number to WWE Superstar and promised she'll do anything you ask her to do. In the days that followed, WWE Superstar reveals a fetish to Miss Grant and tested McMahon's promise that she would do anything with a request that she send a video of herself urinating. Let you think about that one for a second. At this point, Miss Grant is just numb to all of this. And she is on autopilot and she is just obeying. Remember in episode 1, I told you McMahon was trying to rewire her brain. And he, at this point, has done so. She obeys that request, and then he calls her a bitch. That same month, WWE Superstar expressed to Miss Grant his desire to set a play date and have a sexual encounter. However, fortunately for her, a snowstorm changed WWE Superstar's travel plans, and Miss Grant ultimately used COVID-19 at that time as an excuse to back out. So in early 2022, McMahon abruptly distanced himself from Miss Grant. Something had to happen, y'all. He actually tells her he could not speak to or be in the same room as her. So what do y'all think happened? And if you guess that his wife might have gotten privy to something, you probably be right. On January 9th, 2022, McMahon agreed to speak with Miss Grant in his condo. During this meeting, McMahon told Miss Grant that his wife, Linda McMahon, had learned about his relationship with Miss Grant and that he was losing his condo and that she was divorcing him or would divorce him. He added, too, that a public divorce would make Miss Grant a headline. He then goes on to say to salvage his marriage and avoid both the negative publicity and other repercussions of a divorce, he wanted to ensure Miss Grant would remain silent about his personal misconduct in order to preserve his controlling interest in the WWE. So McMahon tells Miss Grant that if she leaves the WWE and signs what's known as an NDA, y'all, a non-disclosure agreement, he was confident Miss Linda McMahon would not divorce him and he could remain in the condo, and Miss Grant would avoid losing her entire reputation. So he has done all these things to her. And then he tells her, look, I need you to sign this thing saying you'll never talk about it, because if you do, it's going to ruin your reputation. Not his, her reputation. He's still manipulating her, but this is all about him just as much as her. And he doesn't mention he's worried about his reputation. Guaranteed. You think he really cares about her reputation? He's told everybody in the WWE how much of a slut she was and showed them all pictures of her. And hell, he's let half the staff screw her. He's not worried about her reputation. So McMahon instructs Miss Grant that she should not go back in the office and immediately lessens her involvement on open work items. Miss Grant expresses concern about both her name being mentioned in the media and the loss of control over her image, especially as McMahon had shared content of her for close to 2 years. The ramifications of her career. I mean, you have it struggling to get a job at Walmart at that point. McMahon suggests that he would attempt to keep her reputation intact and that he or WWE corporate officer number 1 would personally help her find another job. How nice of him. He offers her $3 million. They agree on it. She wants the $3 million. He says, oh, we can't pay it all at once. We got to give it to you in installments. So on January 19th of 2022, Miss Grant advised McMahon that she had contacted Celebrity Doctor about an attorney referral. And on that physician's recommendation and upon McMahon's approval, she signed a retainer agreement with a lawyer later that day. On January 24th of 2022, McMahon continued to engage, even after all this, in sexual text messages with Grant, including encouraging her to send an explicit photo to WWE Superstar. Remember him? McMahon also requested Miss Grant send him content that she sent to WWE Superstar. So not only do you need to start texting him sex pics, text them to me too. I want to see, because that's how he gets off, y'all. He gets off on this like no other. I mean, this is his thing. So the negotiations of the NDA were brief. They lasted in the entire negotiation process only took about 8 days. Ms. Grant reminded McMahon that the NDA ought to address people who knew about their relationship, including but not limited to the corporate officers, Laranitis, McMahon's personal assistants. Ms. Grant and her attorney sought to incorporate the list of individuals, and all of that, of course, flatly rejected by McMahon and the WWE, who reverted to their original draft rather than incorporate any of her proposed changes, with the exception that as of this date of execution, McMahon would never speak of their relationship. So January 26th of 2022, McMahon articulated an even more pressing need to get the NDA signed. He is really desperate to get this thing signed. He realizes, I'm going to be in a lot of shit if she doesn't sign this. On January 27th, 2022, just 8 days after Miss Grant had hired an attorney, McMahon left Miss Grant a lengthy audio message explaining why they needed to go through with the NDA, pushing her to hurry up and sign it, and advising that he would be double fucked if she did not. And in that, it's a reasonable assumption that he's referring to the board of directors for the WWE finding out about this and him being removed from that board. And on January 28th, Miss Grant succumbs to the pressure to sign the NDA with no changes, and she does. And on February 4th, 2022, she was wired $1 million, which was the first installment. And on February 28th, she was wired $10,000 to cover her attorney fees. And on February 9th, she gives notice to Laranitis into the Human Resources office, a letter basically leaving notice that she's leaving the WWE. And after signing that NDA, she continued to ask about who had told Linda McMahon about this relationship, right? She's concerned about her ability to obtain employment in the future. Linda McMahon, very powerful woman, very involved in politics at one point, probably could affect her career ongoing. This is a scorned wife at this point. She's worried about all those things, and understandably so, as she should be. And McMahon responded that it did not matter and that he was tired of her questions. After the NDA was signed, McMahon, wearing only a white robe, met Miss Grant in his condo to review outstanding business items. As Miss Grant was proceeding to the door to leave, he grabs her arm before she exits and commands her to do one last thing. And get on your knees. That's exactly what he told her. As Miss Grant knelt on the hard floor, barely a few feet away from the front door, McMahon opens his robe and ordered her to eat him. McMahon grabbed the back of Miss Grant's head and slammed her face into his crotch a couple times until she gagged and pushed him away, telling him to stop. She couldn't breathe. McMahon responded that she wouldn't get away that easily and held her head as he force fucked the back of her mouth until she had no air. Miss Grant tried to push him away, but he held her head firmly in place and loudly commanded her to look up, followed by, "Take it, bitch." They monetarily made eye contact before McMahon force caused Miss Grant's body to convulse and retch with tears streaming down her face. McMahon then released his hold and closed his robe as she stood up. After leaving, Miss Grant never saw McMahon again. So on March 2nd of 2022, while Miss Grant was away on a trip to Florida, McMahon called Miss Grant and advised that it would probably be the last time she'd ever hear from him. And if she needed anything, to contact WWE Corporate Officer number 1 or number 2. Over the course of approximately half-hour call, McMahon laminated both his inability to focus on upcoming WrestleMania and how his personal life had blown up over the past few weeks. Towards the end of the conversation, McMahon and Miss Grant agreed to resume contact after WrestleMania. He also instructed Miss Grant to continue having sexual relations with other men, including WWE Superstar. You can't make this shit up. On or around March 4th of 2022, WWE Superstar messaged Miss Grant that he was in New York. In line with McMahon's order, Miss Grant texted WWE Superstar explicit images. On March 27th of 2022, WWE Superstar reached out again to Miss Grant, and Miss Grant interpreted those back-to-back advances as an indication of McMahon's continued control. On March 30th, 2022, Miss Grant's counsel received a call from McMahon's attorney advising that there had been an anonymous email about the relationship between Grant and McMahon and Laranitis. Later in June and July of 2022, stories were published regarding the matter of McMahon's multiple NDAs with various women associated with the WWE and others, and Miss Grant did not receive another payment under her NDA in February of 2023. Further, despite assurances from McMahon that he would cover her medical care and costs associated with the tax liability of that $1 million payment, McMahon had refused to cover those costs. McMahon continued to pay for her medical care until April 15th of 2022, and then it abruptly ceased. McMahon provided Grant with gifts to keep her under his control. Upon information and belief, the gifts provided to Miss Grant included ones purchased by McMahon and expensed by the WWE, of course. And examples of the items, you may be wondering, what are some of the stuff McMahon would get Miss Grant? We've got a list of such things. Alternative clinic medical care and medical and cosmetic services and products. Clubhouse access tickets to the Belmont Stakes. WrestleMania private full-day transportation and premium tickets, a $2,000 Nordstrom gift card, a massive box of Godiva chocolates, $20,000 towards surgery paid directly to a surgeon's office, pearl diamond lariat necklace, a blue cashmere knee-length cardigan, various clothes, cashmere clothes. How about a 2022 BMW 430 Xi? $5,000 gift certificate to a spa, 2 private chef catered dinners in McMahon's condo, gold and diamond paperclip necklace, $15,000 in Bloomingdale gift cards. We told you about that one. Food assortment display and antique tea ceremony set from Saudi Arabia, and large bouquets of flowers that he had delivered to her every other week for those 3 years. I submit to you that the flower deliveries were to keep her in line, keep her happy, make her think he's being sweet when he shares her with all his friends, right? So Ms. Grant was groomed, obviously, in all these cases. And that was, I want to be fair here, and that's why I listed those gifts out and things that she did receive. Personally, I say at least she was getting something for her efforts there. As bad and as horrible as she was treated and as disgusting as she was treated and talked to, at least she got something, right? There's still more to this story. Now we're going to get into the response. to all this. I'm going to stop it for today. As much as I hate to do it, you still ain't heard everything. Now we're going to get into the response when all this gets out, because at some point, what does she do? She sues him, right? That's what we're talking about here. And we're going to get into the response, not only from her, but from individuals like the McMahons outside of Vince McMahon. How about his kids? They've issued a response. We're going to talk about that. How about the response from who now owns the WWE, which is a company called TKO, which also owns the UFC. And they had a response to all of this. And how about a response from Vince McMahon himself? He issued a response through his spokesman, and we will cover all that with you. So stay tuned. It only gets better. I appreciate everyone listening. Really quick, we launched this super fast, y'all. This was within a couple of days' time and a lot of hard work. Y'all have been really responsive, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. As soon as we're done with this episode, we're going to update you on what this series is going to be about, because it's not just about Vince McMahon. This is about elite people in society that seem to get away with, quite in some cases, murder. Literally murder. We're going to talk about all that. We're going to bring you the real court cases. So look for that. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Peace.